I think the most important part is setting the example. And setting that example and knowing that people are watching my actions far more than they're listening to my words. And if my actions don't reflect what I say and what I believe, I've got a problem, and it's gonna set the tone for everyone else.
Hello, folks, and welcome to Swimming in the Flood, a podcast where we navigate the challenging currents in growth in business. My guest today is Tim McCandless. He is the president and CEO of the Narragansett Council of Scouting America. Welcome, Tim. How are you today?
Hey, thank you, Trent. I'm doing great. It's a beautiful day. Glad to be with you.
Thank you. Thank you for joining us. Tim, we got to meet each other, nearly 5 years ago now. You had the opportunity to come to see one of my speaking sessions. And then directly after that, I think you asked me for money.
There you go. That's the way to do it.
And when you work in a nonprofit, I would assume raising funds is one of the primary jobs that you have as part of a CEO.
It is. To make sure that we can fulfill our mission, we have to have the resources. So we look for people that have an interest in what we do and to help make that happen.
How did you get involved in scouting?
Like many, I grew up in Cub Scouts as a kid when I was 8 years old, and continued into a Boy Scout troop, which I had many adventures in over the years and did lots of cool outdoor things. Went off to college and was working on the Scout Camp summer staff during my summers just to make some money and help fund my way through college. But when I was in college, I learned about a program for people interested in nonprofit youth work, whether it's scouting or Boys and Girls Club or other organizations. And I kind of fell into that by mistake, so to speak. But I continued into that program in addition to my major. And I did an internship my last semester of college with the local Boy Scout Council. And right before I graduated, they offered me a job to work for the Boy Scouts. And I was a very poor college student. And here they are offering me a job, and I took it. And I've been doing it for 37 years.
What's your favorite merit badge that you earned? Do you have one that stands out among the others?
The first one that comes to mind is, as a scout, I took the cycling merit badge, and I had enjoyed riding bikes. And so I did the cycling merit badge, and there's a bunch of requirements to complete that badge. And the biggest requirement is you have to do some 5-mile rides, 10-mile, 25-mile rides. And then the capstone is you have to do a 50-mile ride. I never did the 50-mile ride. I never finished the badge, but I have been a cyclist ever since. In fact, I did my 15-mile ride this morning out there, but I have been cycling ever since. It all started with taking that merit badge.
That's exciting. Coincidentally, I have that same merit badge, and you've just evoked the memory of the day we did our 50. Did you develop some leadership skills when you were in the Scouts?
Absolutely.
How?
Well, I think back to one of the most important leadership lessons I learned. I think I was 16 years old, and I had just become the leader of my scout troop, the youth leader of my troop, what's called a senior patrol leader. And I went off to a class about senior patrol leaders. I learned all these great things I should be doing. And I came back to the next troop meeting, and I took over that troop meeting like I'm supposed to. But what I didn't do is I didn't consult with the scoutmaster, the adult leader, who's like the coach. Okay. I didn't consult with him first. I just took things and was making all kinds of changes to our troop, excited to do it. And afterwards, he called me to the side when it was all said and done and said, "This is my troop, and we do things my way around here." And we had a great conversation, but what I learned an important lesson. I took off and was doing this without cooperation and working in teamwork with my coach. It'd be kind of like the quarterback of the football team calling all the plays out on the field, but never talking to the coach. Right. That's what I was doing. And I learned a super important lesson about leadership at a very young age, about working with the people around me and not just barging off on my own, doing my own thing. But then I continued to learn great lessons in leadership through scouting. One of those was as I grew in leadership positions as a youth, I learned a great deal of public speaking skills, working with teams, budgeting on a smaller scale, which has now become a much bigger scale. And that's been set a good foundation for me in my career.
Wow, what a great story. And all of this is happening by the time you're 18 years old.
Exactly.
Great foundation. Let's go back to that Scoutmaster. How did you feel about him, one, waiting until the end to pull you aside, and two, his message about it's his troop?
I was grateful he didn't correct me in front of my peers and the younger scouts. So I was very thankful for that. But it was, in a sense, it was kind of crushing. I thought he'd be super excited about everything I had just done in this meeting. And instead, he was a little bit angry about what I had done in this meeting. And it wasn't about anything I did wrong. It was all about the lack of communication. One could argue maybe his comments were a little bit harsher than they maybe had to be, but he got my attention. And if it doesn't kill you, it makes you stronger, right? I'm much stronger, and it's an important lesson I know and learn and tell today because it really stuck with me. And so it was a really impactful couple of minutes. But what happened is, after those initial words, he and I talked about what to do different in the future and set a path for how we work together in the future. And we ended up everything going great after that.
If we connect that to part of your current role, you have a pretty large and diverse executive committee that you meet with a few times a year. How do you take that first Scoutmaster's lesson and apply it into those board meetings?
I think that really has stuck with me as I became the executive director and CEO of nonprofit organizations, including this council, the Narragansett Council. I realized I can't just be a renegade off on my own, doing my own thing. It all goes back to that lesson. It's working cooperatively with the executive committee, volunteer board members, to jointly craft a vision, craft a strategy. And it's not me moving along and making all the calls. It's working with a diverse group of people who bring all kinds of experience, wisdom, knowledge, training to what we do.
By the way, I do know that scolding because I had the same one when I was 16, had my first time as an SPL.
Yeah.
So I do know that. How do you hold yourself accountable now as a leader and maintain integrity and transparency, both for the people that you report to, but also those that report to you?
I think integrity is foundational. I think transparency is critical in the way we operate. In scouting, in the world I work in professionally, maybe I have got a easier path than maybe some others, because in scouting, as we teach kids, I learned it as a scout, you did too. We teach kids a code of ethics to live their life by, and it's called the Scout Oath and Scout Law. And it's a set of tenets and ideals that we teach kids and adults to live by and judge their decisions by. And that sticks with me today as an adult, as it does for virtually every adult who was a scout, to be able to use that oath and law as a measuring stick of the decisions and choices and actions that we make. And the question is, do we follow through? Character is a super important a trait for leaders, strong character. And that really boils down to, what are your values and do you live by them consistently? And in scouting, that's what we learn. And so it's always a challenge to do that. But I have that as my base to measure myself against. And all of our staff and our volunteers strive to do that same thing. And we correct when we veer off of that, whether accidentally or otherwise, we correct ourselves in that process. And then transparency that one came to me a little bit later in my career. When I started, that was not a real priority in the place I worked. It wasn't like anti-transparent, but just wasn't a priority. It was actually a board member who taught me about that. And it came from an experience that he had in his business, which at that time, this was in a different state, but at that time, high profile business that he was in, that was in a lot of legal hot water, because of controversial decisions, not bad decisions, but just controversial decisions they had made. And he learned the hard way about transparency would have been a much better course of action. And he had that conversation with me about that, something he had learned. And I took that to heart at that time. And what that means for me is, I don't want anything that me or my team does to ever, the measuring stick, I share this with our staff. If we don't want that conversation or those actions to show up on the front page of the newspaper tomorrow, we should not be talking about it. We should not even be thinking about doing it. If we have to be able to defend ourselves literally in the front page of the paper or whatever media source that would be. If we don't feel confident in that, then we're veering into territory we don't belong in. And so that guides our actions, and it guides transparency in the sense that I believe that we should be an open book. And so we publish our financial statements every single month. And there's no secrets in that. If anyone wants to know how we operate, happy to sit down with them and show them how we operate. And I find that, to me, that was freeing to adopt that mentality that we got nothing to hide, no secrets here, nothing to hide. We're an open book, and I think we operate better that way.
Sure. So how do you train your staff, your employees to follow some of those same, well, the words would be a physically strong, mentally awake, and morally straight?
Yes. I think the most important part is setting the example. And I don't claim to be a perfect example, but setting that example and knowing that people are watching my actions far more than they're listening to my words.
Sure.
And if my actions don't reflect what I say and what I believe, I've got a problem, and it's gonna set the tone for everyone else. If an off-color joke is told, do I let it go? Do I laugh at it? Do I let it go on anything unsaid about that, or do I stand up for other people in that moment in time? That says a lot about. It can set a powerful example in that simple example. Can set a powerful standard for others. People watch what I do far more than they listen to what I say. So setting the example, I think, is the number one thing.
Absolutely right. Because particularly you deal with a lot of younger adults who are still impressionable, still finding their way, and are looking for good mentors, which you are one, to provide them some guidance on the rules of the road, so to speak.
Yeah.
Where does self-confidence come from in you, and how do you apply your own confidence in your leadership?
I think that I have grown in self-confidence over the last many years. In the beginning of my leadership roles, I was not a very confident leader.
Oh,
And part of that grows from experience, from going through challenges. Difficult things can help sharpen us and make us better when we have to make tough choices and live with the consequences of those choices. All of those things make us better and stronger. But one of the most important things I have learned that has made me a self-confident person today is understanding that I don't have to know everything. I don't have to be an expert at everything. People do not expect me to know everything. As a young leader, I kind of thought that. I felt that the way you grow in confidence is to become an expert at everything and show everyone you're the expert on this stuff. And that is, as I've gotten older or more mature, I guess, a little grayer in the process, I think I have in my life, have come to the realization that that's not what people expect of me. They don't expect me to know everything, to be an expert on everything, and to pretend like I've got all the answers, because I certainly don't. In fact, I've come to the realization that when I was young, I thought I was pretty hot stuff, and I thought I knew a lot of stuff. And the older I've gotten, I've come to the realization I don't know near as much as I thought I did. I know the older I get, the less I know.
and it's not just from age. It's
That's
the
right.
reason that gives us that, right? There are
Yes.
more questions in the world than there are answers.
Yes, and being comfortable with that and knowing that that's okay.
Yes.
I don't have to know all the answers, but what I think I've gained along the way is confidence that we'll figure out the answers together.
Sure.
We'll find the solutions to these difficult problems together. We'll solve the problem. We'll make a decision. It may not be, there's no way to guarantee every decision is going to be absolutely right or the perfect decision, but we're going to make decisions, and having confidence that it's going to move us forward, and we'll learn from our mistakes and we'll correct where we need to, and we'll just keep moving forward. But having the ability to have freedom in recognizing I don't have to know it all,
Sure.
but together, working with a group of people together, we can move things forward in a positive direction.
Wonderful. You have a lot of young adults on your staff that maybe are in that overconfidence stage for themselves, right? How do you help bridge that gap for them to make that road easier between some of that overconfidence perhaps and the skills that they need to be the leader that that you need in your organization?
Yeah, I think it depends on the person, is finding out how to help give them some coaching in that regard. And in some cases, it's just maybe sharing a story from my past where I thought I knew it all. And it turns out I didn't know half of what I thought I did, or even less than that. And that's okay. And I don't have to know it all. And also being clear, I don't expect them to know everything. I don't expect them to be perfect in their processes. But what I do expect, that we're going to see the goal, and we're going to work towards it, and we're going to take positive action towards it, and we're going to involve others as necessary. In my world, we don't expect people to be lone wolves. Matter of fact, we don't want them to be lone wolves. That's going to result in usually poorer decisions if we're off trying to do things on our own than if we work together.
Sure.
But trying to help them bring in other people. And every once in a while, sometimes it takes someone to actually kind of figuratively slap them in the face to give them a little of a shock value. It reminds me when I was young in this profession. It was a break at a staff retreat. I was bragging to one of my comrades about some success I had had, and it was the boss who was in the role I'm in now, who overheard this conversation, and I was over the top bragging about myself. To be honest, I was in my late 20s, and he made the comment to me in front of my friend. He said, "Tim, if you ever need anyone to point out your weaknesses, let me know. I'm happy to do it." I'll never forget those words. It knocked me down a couple of rings, and it helped me better appreciate the value of humility.
Have you in turn gone back and had that same conversation with anybody?
I have. Not quite those words, but that message, yes.
How did you feel when you had to do that?
To me, it's a difficult thing to say to someone because it's a bitter pill to swallow. It was a bitter pill for me to swallow when he said it to me. And I recognize it, that it will be a bitter pill for someone to swallow that message. But I also know, as a looking at them, who wants only the best for them and who wants them to grow as a leader, they need to hear it. They may not want to hear it, but they need to hear it. Now, I have to adjust the message based on the person and the situation, but there are times when people need to hear that feedback. As we teach in scouting and our leadership programs, feedback is a gift. And the question is, are we going to open our arms to accept the gift, or are we going to reject the gift? And that's something we talk about with our staff, is feedback. And sometimes you get some critical feedback. And what do you do with that? And are you willing to listen to it when you hear it?
That's the hardest part, is willing to accept it, right? Willing to accept it, because these are qualitative items. It's not quantitative. I can't show you, you had 3 interceptions yesterday. It's not as clear as that. Very qualitative items. So what you were talking about in your training programs, maybe you can talk a little about what are those training programs that the council and you've been involved in to help develop those leaders?
Yes. Well, one of the things that we do is, to this conversation, to the point of this conversation to some degree, is we really like the Clifton Strengths program that Gallup provides, and a lot of companies and organizations use it. But for me, I really like it because I think most of our staff really get a lot out of it, because it acknowledges the fact we don't have to be experts at everything, but it does identify our strengths and help us invest in our strengths, acknowledge that we have areas we're not very good at, and that's okay. That's really important, to acknowledge that that's okay. But then the other thing it does for us, and we use it regularly with our staff, including at a staff retreat we just had last week, we focus on what everyone's top 5 strengths are, and how do we get diversity when we put teams together, so that we've got people with different strengths. Yes. And we're not all thinking the same way, because otherwise you get some hard chargers that are all maximizers and they forget about everything else in the world. And sometimes you can get the not as good a results as you would like from that. So we do like the Clifton Strengths program. We have an internal training program that we do, a leadership training program we do. Those who are involved in our organization would know it as the Wood Badge Training Program. And what I like about that is it teaches core leadership principles, And nothing surprising about communication, teamwork, how to create high-performing teams, how to be a good communicator on a team and as a leader. But one of the things that really adds to the typical training program is you do this 6-day training program, but you don't graduate from it until like a year and a half later, until you've actually implemented, and you have to show that you actually implemented the concepts that were learned in real life situations, in our case, in the scouting organization, but it could apply in any situation. And you've got 18 months to do it. So you set out with a series of very specific goals coming out of the training, the last day of the training workshop, and you've got 18 months to finish them, to put in place what you said you would do, and to actually create some projects using the techniques learned. I think it's very powerful.
It sounds it. Is this something you do? You put the wood badge once a year, or for every time somebody reaches a certain level, we're going to have this training? How does that work?
Yeah, we do. We offer this intense course, 6-day course, every 2 years. We offer it for our volunteers and our staff to be able to participate in that course. And it's a national program. You can find wood badge courses all over the country. Right. And even if it's not offered here on a particular year, our staff or volunteers could do this course nearby in Connecticut or Massachusetts or wherever.
I only can imagine some of the projects that people are tasked with, and this wide range of communication. And one of the focuses I notice here is that there's a commitment requirement. You're asking these younger leaders, emerging leaders, however you call them there, to make a commitment. Very cool. Wow. Tim, who's your favorite fictional character?
That's easy. Captain James T. Kirk of the Starship Enterprise.
Tiberius. What makes him your favorite character?
I've been a Trekkie since I was a kid, and still am today. Proudly am today. But I always loved Captain Kirk because he was adventurous. He had a sense of humor. He was a risk taker. But also, when I think back as a leader, he was a leader in that he involved his leadership team in making decisions. He wasn't just a solo act. He involved Spock and McCoy and the others in all the episodes and on the movies to solve problems and to do risky things and achieve great things in the end. And he made mistakes. He was human in the sense that he made mistakes and paid the price for it. I've always loved him.
Very great answer. Tim, I want to thank you for joining us today. Thank you very much for giving me your time. And friends, thank you for joining Swimming in the Flood. It's tough navigating with these challenging currents, but with one tack or another, we'll get there together. We'll get to see Tim McCandless a little bit in our future, hopefully. Thank you for joining Swimming in the Flood. If you enjoyed today's podcast, please subscribe and share it with a friend. You can find all of our episodes on Apple Music, Spotify, and YouTube. And you can also find our episodes on my website at trentthiru.com. See you next time.